friends, welcome back to 100 Blocks in 2025. Today we're making a purple block and we're going to play with those quarter square triangles again. Let's see what we're doing. So today's block comes from the Farmer's Wife book. It is on page 236. It's block number 109 and it's called Windows. And we can see from the diagram, it's a pretty simple block. We have this quarter square triangle in the center and then we have this frame around the outside. Now I could have made this frame just about any size. It looks to me that it finishes at about 2 inches, but in order to make this block super easy math-wise, I've gone ahead and called these outside strips 1.5 inches. So we're doing a 1.5 inch frame around the outside of the block, and then we have to come up with this center. So if we're doing 1.5 all the way around, that means our center quarter square triangle has to finish at 4.5 inches in order to be put into the block so that everything fits and comes out at 6.5. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to cut two different squares, two different fabrics here. So if our block in the center has to finish at 4.5, in order to make a half square triangle, we would upsize our squares by 1/2 inch and cut them at 5. But we're making a quarter square triangle, which means we're going to have to sew the seam twice. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to size up that center square to 5.5 inches. And I've got two purples here, 1 and 1, that are 5.5 inches. So remember, when we sew these two together, we're going to get two half square triangles, and then we're going to use those two half square triangles to sew together to make our quarter square. So we only need one square of each color in order to make this fit. So that's what we're going to do to start. And then also we need a fabric to go around the outside. So I have a third purple here. And what I need for that one is right here, these two little rectangles here are going to be 1.5 by 4.5. So I have two strips that are 1.5 by 4.5. And then I'm going to need for the sides two strips that are 1.5 by 6.5. So there are all my purples ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line diagonally down the center of one of these squares so I can sew 1/4 of an inch on either side. And then we're going to cut those with our clearly perfect slotted trimmer so that we have perfect half square triangles. So let's do that part first. Hopefully you can see that I have sewn down 1/4 of an inch on either side of my center line. So now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to cut through the center. I'm not going to press anything yet. I'm just going to cut through the center and get these two apart. Now remember, I need them to be the right size, and we've oversized these squares in order to get these out. So I'm going to use my clearly perfect slotted trimmer, and remember, with the trimmer we have a trimmer A and a trimmer B. They come together in the pack. Trimmer A is for half sizes and trimmer B is for whole sizes. So I need to use my trimmer B because I'm going to lay this down on the 5-inch mark because this is our first part of our block. So I'm going to lay this on the 5-inch mark. I'm going to trim the sides of my block. So now I know I have a perfectly sized 5-inch half square triangle. I'm going to go down here and clip off the dog ears while I'm here so that I don't have any dog ear points. So I'm going to repeat that with the other side, and then I will have two perfectly sized 5-inch half square triangles. Now I'm going to go and press the seams open, press these blocks out so that we can start our quarter square triangle. Okay, now I have two identical half square triangles that are 5 inches. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put the two triangles together, but this time, instead of doing them color to color, I'm going to swap them so that my center seams are going like so, and they're matching. And when I open this up after sewing, I'm going to have that quarter square. So I'm going to put away from the seam. We'll have our seam going horizontal, and then vertically I'm going to match my 2 points right here at the top and at the bottom, right? And then I'm going to draw my diagonal line this way and sew 1/4 of an inch opposite of my center seam. And then once we get those cut apart and trimmed, then we'll have our quarter square triangle. So let's draw our center line, so 1/4 of an inch on either side, okay? And then we'll come back and see what we have. Okay, so now I have laid my 2 squares together. I have sewn 1/4 of an inch on either side of the diagonal line that is perpendicular to my seam line. And now I'm going to take my ruler again and cut my block apart corner to corner. I've not pressed anything. So now that my block is apart, if I were to open this block up right now, you can see I have a 1/4 square triangle that we need. And I have 2 of them. I'm going to set this one aside because I only need 1. So we'll set that aside. But before we press this, we're going to trim it down because remember we oversized. So this time we're going to use trimmer A, which is half sizes, and we're going to put the 4.5 inch line right here on our stitch line, and then we have this vertical line going through here. So if we align this just right on our stitch line and our vertical line, that will give us a perfect 1/4 square triangle. And now I can trim whatever edges I need to trim off of this part of the block, and carefully trim the dog ears out. Okay, and then I'll have that perfectly sized triangle. So now I can go over to my iron and I can press this block open, and my 4.5 inch center will be perfect. Okay, so let's go do that. All right, friends, now we have our 1/4 square triangle. So all we have to do now is finish our block. So we need our 1.5 by 4.5 inch strips, top and bottom, right? So we add those to this block, then we'll add our sides. And now all that's left is to add our 1.5 by 6.5 inch sides, and then our block is done. Right, let's do that. There we go. We have our perfectly sized 6.5 inch block with our 1/4 square triangle right in the center. So there you have it. You got to practice your 1/4 square triangles, make a cute little purple block or whatever color you choose that day. And I went ahead and I opened up the seams on the back in the 1/4 square triangle to reduce bulk, but didn't do that for the outside border because it really was very unnecessary. So I hope you understand how changing that little bit of a block, making the math super easy, making the border super easy, we can just look at it and we can tell what might look good. And all these little tweaks make our life super simple, makes our math super simple, and it sees that we're going to get our blocks done right away. So I hope you like that, using our skills to make our 1/4 square triangle, to make our simple block. And I hope you like how easy it was to redesign that math. So when we're doing our half square triangles, we go up by 1/2 an inch from the center that we need, and then 1/4 square triangles, we go up a full inch because we're going to have to do that twice. And don't forget to trim your half square triangles in between so that they're the right size. But using that clearly perfect slotted trimmer, the trimmer A and trimmer B, made our life so much easier, and it made the math super easy too. So I hope you enjoyed this really cute block, and I hope that you'll come and visit me at cabinquilters.com.